Well, thank you. It's great to be here. And yes, we were drowned rats. There's no question of that. It was quite the event. We had set up tables, about 35 tables in the park, and then you go to a table and it was a refugee story, and you had to choose which way to go, and it was to understand the process that refugees go through. But it is a real privilege to be with you this evening. I've been looking forward to this, and I love your church building too. I love architecture. I love old places, and it's absolutely beautiful. Randy was telling me that your church was built in 1911, and the school was, and our church as well was 1911. Slightly different architecture, but I want to share with you immigrant ministries and how we got into it, the process that's involved for us. I'm going to just say that, if you're thinking about doing some refugee work or you're thinking about reaching out to newcomers, we would not necessarily be the model because we kind of were all into it and a bit overwhelming in the sense that for some. So you do not need to take it to the degree that we took it to, okay? But I hope that out of it will come some valuable ideas, thoughts, scripturally, story-wise, thought-wise, that you could use. We were at the Walmart just about 2 hours ago here, just very close by, and I was really struck by the diversity I was seeing in Walmart there in Waterloo, just right on the edge. And you certainly have a lot of the nations that are here, but it's not easy always to begin to make inroads. However, in some ways it is, in some ways it's not, and I'll be talking about that a little bit as we go. But I want to begin by just saying that, where to point this thing? I got to figure out where to point it. Yeah, maybe down. Is it changing them? No. What's that? Tap the screen? Oh. Really? Okay. Is that right? So. Okay, but it's not advancing for me. Sorry, my apologies. It says something about. Okay. Down. There we go. Was that the down button? Okay. Well, I just want to begin by saying, as is the case for all of us, we have this treasure of our relationship with Christ and who He is in jars of clay to show that this all-surpassing power is from God and not from us. And I think maybe I'm more aware of my own weaknesses, like all of us. We're aware of our own weaknesses more than others may. But I see my own weaknesses, and I'm very aware. I'll tell you one of my big weaknesses, and this will strike you as odd, perhaps, but one of my weaknesses is I am not given to language learning. Language learning is not my ability. But that actually allows me to build more friendships with more people and broaden in ways that I'd never expect. The beautiful thing about our relationship with Christ, it's not about us, it's about Him, isn't it? Well, my friend Satur, I'd like to tell you about. Satur allows us to use his name publicly. There's no problem with that at all. Satur was born in Afghanistan, and the story for Satur is tragic but beautiful on another way. Satur here is just before he's being baptized at City Church in Winnipeg, and as I baptized him, I asked a question that I ask everyone, and I wasn't thinking when I asked him this question. Of course, the first question is, have you trusted Christ as your personal Savior? The answer, of course, is yes. The next question I said, are you willing to suffer for him? And that was a silly question for me to ask, because his answer to me was, I already have. And that's what he said, I already have. And let me tell you how he has suffered. In Afghanistan, he was a teenager, and as a teenager, his mom came down with cancer. They couldn't afford to pay the bills. They were a Muslim family. They didn't know how they were going to make it, so he dropped out of what schooling he had and sold fruit in front of his home to try to bring in money that they could buy the medicine for his mom. After a while, an Iranian businessman came by the name of Robert. Robert came, I don't know, every couple days and would buy fruit. Eventually, Robert asked Satur, why don't you work for me? I've got an office. I'm cleaning. That you could clean the office and help me out, and I'll pay you, and I'll help you buy some medicine. So Satur took him up on that. But after a while, he asked Robert the question. He said, "What happens in this other room that's going on? What goes on there?" And Robert wisely said, "I won't tell you right now, but I have a question for you, and I want you to go home and think about this. If a woman gave birth to a child but never knew a man, what would you think?" And so he went home, he thought about it, he came back the next day, he just said, I've been thinking about that all night, and that would just be absolutely amazing. Robert continued to give him questions like that along the way, and eventually showing himself of great interest. And Robert then said to Satur, "Let me introduce you to what we do in this other room. We study the Bible." And so he introduced them to a small group. There's two others that were in Bible study with Robert. And Robert gave him some Christian literature of some sort. I'm not sure what it was. He took it home, and Satur's uncle came by to visit, saw the literature, and was outraged, absolutely outraged, and demanded, "Who gave you this literature?" If you ever meet Satur, he is one of the most faithful people you'll ever meet, and he refused to say. And so Satur, refusing, the uncle then grabbed him and took him to a cave with other members of the Taliban, and they began to beat him. And they took hot irons to him, they cut him, he's got scars today, but he refused to say. So then, finally, Satur's father said, "Look, why don't you bring him home and I'll get him to tell." So they brought him home, dropped him off, and the father came up to Satur and he said, "Son, I know you're not going to ever tell. They're going to kill you. And so here's some money, you need to go. You need to leave." It was the middle of the night, and Satur, having been beaten, broken bones literally, not knowing what to do, all he could think of was go to find Robert. So he went on to Robert's door, started pounding and pounding in the middle of the night. Nobody was answering. And eventually, a neighbor came out and said, "If you're looking for that man, he left. He left, and you'll find the doors unlocked." And so he opened the door, walked in, and everything was gone, and there was ashes of everything burnt, like all the literature, everything was burnt and gone. Satur didn't know what to do. And so he came out, and he knew that they'd be looking for him. So he hid under a tarp of a truck, and the truck took off and was going and going. He had no idea where it was headed. And finally, after a long time, the truck came to a stop. He came out. He didn't know where he was. It ended up that they had crossed the border. They were in Pakistan at that point. He couldn't speak the language. He knew nobody at all. He was totally deserted, lost, didn't know where Robert was, didn't know anything. And for weeks, he ate out of garbage cans and was not able to shower, and it was such a difficult time. He was thought to be homeless in fact, people thought that he was homeless or on drugs or something, and people would stay away from him. A couple of children saw him, and they talked to him and realized that they spoke the same language. They were also from Afghanistan. And they brought him back to their parents, and the parents gave him food and shower. They're a Muslim family, but cared for them, cared for him, and he had a place. And so then these new friends said to Satir, you need to let your parents know where you are. And so he tried to call home. There was no answer. And then he tried to call a neighbor. The neighbor picked up the phone. He said, "Oh, you don't know?" "No." "What?" He said, the night that you left, your uncle came looking for you, and when you were gone and couldn't be found, they blew up your parents' house with your parents in it, and your parents are dead." Satir, of course, broke down with that. It was just such a hard thing. Fast forward, Naomi House in Winnipeg had the privilege of being able to sponsor him to Winnipeg. And he came, and when he first came, he was suffering from PTSD, from all that had taken place, all the pain, all the hardship that he'd gone through. Such a difficult journey, and just so hard for him. But Akmol Erastus, Akmol is one of our team members at Naomi House, originally from Pakistan, originally the country director for OM for Pakistan. He began to take him under his wing and began to work with him a little bit and get to know him and befriend him. And, we from the outside were looking and going, okay, so Satir must be a believer. He's gone through all this. He's suffered so much. But Akmol wisely said, I don't think he has yet become a believer in Christ yet fully. He's paid a price, but he hasn't fully come to faith. And so Akmol sat down with him, shared the gospel, and Satir received Christ as Savior. And then went on to be baptized, is going on for the Lord. And now, since, what he's been doing is he was working at a fish production company, because Winnipeg is not far from Lake Winnipeg. We receive a lot of fish and fish processing. So he processes fish, or he was, and saving up money, because those children that helped him, their parents died and they're orphaned now in Pakistan. They're still not believers. And Satir says, the reason I want to bring them to Canada is because I want to share about Christ with them. I don't want to just help them for now. I also want to share Jesus with them. And the two men that he was in Bible study with, they fled to Pakistan. He didn't know where they were, and found out after he came to Winnipeg. And he's actually sponsoring them as well and earning the money, trying to save up to bring them as well. One of them escaped Afghanistan with his family. The other one, the family went into the mountain region, and the man went to Pakistan without his family. They're separated. They don't even know where the family is. They can't make any contact. But those men are believers, and Naomi House is sponsoring them as well. So we're in the process of sponsoring these additional relationships. When we think about immigrant ministries, now I'm sharing with you about refugee work because that's what is my heart, but immigrant ministries, refugee work is a segment of immigrant ministries. And I'm going to be talking about that more in a moment. My friend Brian Syme, I think some of you probably know Brian. Brian has written a number of books. One of them is Canada's New Harvest. He wrote this in the late 1990s, so it's an old book. But this is what he said. He said, at the beginning of the 20th century, Canada was the foremost nation for sending missionaries per capita. Now, at the close of the century, the nations are coming to us. That is powerful. We need to look at missions, in my thinking, from another direction. We need to be sending and encouraging the sending, and we also have to realize that the nations are coming to us. And one of the things about the nations coming to us that we need to really recognize is that there is a window when people come to Canada, there's a window that's open. And many are open to the gospel for the first year, maybe 2 years that they're here. But the longer they're here, the more the window closes. And the reason the window closes is because often they feel isolated. Many come, for example, disillusioned with Islam. They're done with it. Or even Hinduism or Sikhism. But then they're tired of all that, but they haven't built relationships with believers, and so they're missing their cultural identity, and so they go back into their culture, and they can actually become almost more radical after, because they didn't build that friendship. But if we build the friendships with them within the first few years of their arrival, we can make significant inroads. The other thing is that family structures are such that in home countries, that makes it extra difficult for people to make a decision for Christ. But when they're removed from family structure and they're on their own here, they're often, not always, there's a lot of exception to this, but they're often more open to hearing the gospel because the grandparents are not involved. The uncles and aunts, they can make a decision on their own. They can be nurtured, discipled, and encouraged and strengthened apart from the family structure that keeps them from entering back. Last night, Sue and I organized a progressive supper. This is something we do every year for Miller College of the Bible in Winnipeg. 30 students, we took them to 4 different homes. And we divide them into 3 groups and rotate every hour to different homes and have a dish and hear their story. And so we went to a Somalian home of a lady who became a believer in Somalia, had to flee for her sake of persecution. We went to a Karen home from Burma, and her faith in Christ we heard about. We then eventually made our way to a former Sikh home, and Jopreet. And Jopreet actually attends a Brethren Assembly, KCF, where Ron Hampton attends. And Jopreet came to faith in Christ out of Sikhism, but he was speaking of one of the things that was so difficult for him, and so difficult is the grandparents and the family structure. But being here in Canada, he was more free to make decisions apart from the prevailing family dynamics. And so we have to see that as the nations come here, we have great opportunity. We have a great opportunity, and we need to see it. And it's important that we see it as missions as well, because it is missions just as much. It's just a different way and a different way of thinking. Now, I wanted to talk to you a little bit more now about refugees in general, so I'll cover a couple of the other ones in a while. But if we look at refugees, first of all, in the world today, there are 38 million refugees in the world today. Many people also are internally displaced, so that would be IDP, internally displaced, and then refugees. Together, those two combined equals 123.2 million people worldwide that are forcibly displaced currently. 76 times the population of Ontario, or 3 times the population of Canada. Or another way to say it is 1 in 67 people in the world today are forcibly displaced. And I'm going to talk more about why that matters to us as believers in a moment, but I'd like you to kind of keep that in mind. We might ask the question, so why should we care? Even today, Sue and I, as we're driving, we're talking about all the needs, and we're reminding ourselves of what Jesus said, the poor you'll always have with you. It's true. We're not going to be able to alleviate all of poverty. We're not going to be able to take everybody out of refugee situations. So why should we care, and why should we put ourselves into that and involve ourselves? So I want to give you some reasons for that. Well, 4 scriptures, and there's so many in the scriptures, but 4 that I just want to share with you I'll give you a moment if you have your Bibles. You can look that up as well. Leviticus 19:33 and 34, embedded into the law given to the people through Moses. In Leviticus 19:33 to 34, we read, "When a stranger sojourns with you in your land." Do we have people sojourning with us in our land of Canada? The answer is yes. "You shall not do him wrong. You shall treat the stranger who sojourns with you as a native among you, and you shall love him as yourself." That's really pretty powerful. We should love those who are here equal to how we love ourselves and love our family. That's a tall order. That's a big order, but that's the expectation that is on us. And Jesus said in Matthew 25:35, and you remember this, "I was a stranger, and you welcomed me." That's powerful. The Lord, this matters to our Lord. It matters to him in the law of the Old Testament. It matters to him in the person of his Son, Jesus. The writer of Hebrews, in Hebrews 13:2, said, "Do not neglect to show hospitality to strangers, for thereby some have entertained angels unaware." And the Old Testament prophet as well spoke of this too, didn't he? And a beautiful passage of Isaiah 58, which we love and value. Isaiah 58:10, "If you spend yourselves in behalf of the hungry and satisfy the needs of the oppressed, then your light will rise in the darkness." These things matter to the Lord because it really is the heart of the Lord that we care for the oppressed. And we could go on. There's many more examples. But there's also the practical reasons as well. When we think about missionary opportunities, immigration brings the nations to local communities. And as believers, then, of course, we see that chance to fulfill the Great Commission of Matthew 28:19 and 20. It's our chance to make disciples, not just converts, but disciples. And those disciples are made through friendship and hospitality, which I'm going to say more about in a little bit. Also, newcomers can strengthen our churches as well, not just in numbers, but in dynamic of culture and ways. But we have to be pretty open and flexible because it's not always easy and it can be a little bit difficult. And I'm going to share my journey in a moment with you. And I probably could have done it better, okay? But it's inconvenient and it's not always easy. But it can strengthen a local church in terms of seeing the world through the eyes of other people, through their voice, hearing their voices and the stories that they tell, and what's passionate to them. Often you'll find some who are very deep into prayer and loves the Lord and just believes and has their faith is so strong because they've been through so much. We can gain from that. We can be strengthened. And they can be strengthened from us to our commitment to the Scriptures. And they can be discipled and encouraged in turn. And so there are opportunities to strengthen the church. And of course, as we were saying earlier, as we were looking at those verses, the practical compassion that we can have. We're told to care for the widow and the orphan and the stranger. And newcomers certainly fulfill that, but especially in my thinking, where my heart is, refugees especially fulfill that. Immigrant ministries becomes a way to live out our faith. It's really a way in which we are demonstrating to a world that's watching the hope that is in us, this clay jar that has the glory of God in it, because it's not us, it's God. And it gives others an opportunity to see it who wouldn't see it otherwise. So when we think about the nations coming, and I talk a lot about refugee work, and I'm going to talk more about it yet, I'm certainly not done, but I want to just mention that there are a number of ways in which people come to Canada. I'm not an expert on any of these except for if I'm knowledgeable on refugee work. I'm going to just share with you just to kind of refresh our thinking, especially because you have the universities here and you have farms here where people are coming to work. You've got a lot of reasons why people are coming. So, of course, there's the study permits for international students at Canadian institutions. That was cut back significantly, but still there are those who are coming. And what an opportunity it is, because for them to be hosted and cared for by believers, it could make a world of difference. Before I forget, I want to mention that one of the things I've noticed, and I meant to mention this and put this in my notes, but I didn't, and that is that I have found that people who are new to Canada, well, not new, the people who have been in Canada for maybe 10 years, so many have never been in a Canadian home. The vast majority have never been in a Canadian home. They don't know. And when they're invited, it's almost intriguing to them, because they wonder, how do people born here live? What's their life like? In any event, students and building friendships. That's not my area. There are ministries dedicated to that with international students and fantastic work. But that's an opportunity that you can have. You could connect with the local InterVarsity group and ask, are there students that we could care for or host, or could we have give them a meal, or put on a Christmas banquet for the students of the group. There's ways you could partner with these Christian ministries that are reaching students. Then there's the skilled workers pathway, which are express entry systems of federal skilled workers and federal skilled trade people. My friend Akmol that I mentioned earlier, and I'll probably mention him some more yet, that's how he came. He came as an express entry because he's a skilled worker. His English level was high and his academic levels were high, and so he qualified based on that. And actually, just a little humorous story with him, he was studying for the test to come, and so he decided that he'd really bone up on the idioms that we have in Canada. And he studied, and I think he said something like 300 idioms he learned. I didn't even know we had that many. He went to take the test, and he did very poorly on it, only to realize that all the idioms were British that he had studied, and not Canadian. So there's also the provincial nominee program, and in Manitoba we have a lot of that, a lot of people who come through the provincial nominee, and it's excellent. It was actually piloted in Manitoba, and so we have benefited from that. A lot of the provinces are asking to administrate it themselves and be free of the federal restrictions, and as it once was. I'm not sure where that's going at the moment. I don't think that's going to happen. But the provincial nominee program allows people to come to Canada without necessarily set skills, but a set amount of English and ability and having contacts within the Canadian society. The economic pilot programs as well, different pilot programs. So the government will begin a pilot program as a temporary specialized program and roll it out and bring people, rather maybe through agriculture or trying to fill rural areas or northern communities through immigration. There's the business entrepreneur way as well, startup businesses, self-employed people like artists, athletes, cultural professionals. But then there's the family sponsorship, and this one touches on refugee work a lot. So where a member was a refugee, they fled their country due to war and persecution, and they were sponsored to Canada, and when they came, they left their parents behind, or their siblings behind, well, not their siblings, but their children behind, and they wanted to sponsor them, so it's family reunification. There's yet one more program and this is the one that Naomi House works, and I'm going to talk to you about Naomi House more in a moment, getting to that. And that is a sponsorship agreement holder status, and so Naomi House, along with 120 other groups, have created we're part of a sponsorship agreement holder status with the Canadian government. So we're pre-cleared for a set amount of refugees every year to sponsor to Canada. And this year we sponsored 90. Since 2020, we've sponsored 489 refugees to Winnipeg. And we settle them, and we have 1-year window in which to settle them. So people like Satur came through that program. The ones that he is sponsoring are coming through our SAW as well. And then there's another one called Economic Mobility Pathway, which we're running out of time, so I'm not going to go there. But it's another program. But I want to talk to you about Naomi House. All this to say and to share with you about Naomi House. My wife and I were in Native ministry for 20 years, actually more than 20 years. And we worked among our friends, our Indigenous friends. I was commended from Meadowdale Gospel Chapel in Carpentersville, Illinois. Sue and I were. And we moved to Winnipeg in 1986 and worked with this ministry for that whole time, up until 2005. We would publish books and newspapers, and in the evening we'd visit homes. And one of the things that we believe is that friendship evangelism means friendship evangelism. It means that you are still friends with people no matter if your focus changes or not. So we're still involved in Native ministry, but on a side line. In 2005, Indy Chung Chin, or otherwise nicknamed Indiana Jones, was sponsored by our assembly in Winnipeg, the Maples Community Church. And I was an elder at the time, along with a couple other elders. We sponsored Indy from Burma. He's Chin in background. Chin is a tribal group. And we became really good friends. In 2003, the Canadian government put 10 Chin people into Winnipeg. And when they did, they were testing to see how well they would settle. But the problem was nobody spoke English. You see, the thing with refugees, and this is actually good, is that the Canadian government will bring anyone to Canada who's a refugee who qualifies on other fronts, but English and French is not a requirement. So they don't have to know any, because as a refugee, that is not a requirement. Also, health is not a requirement as long as it's not a transmittable disease. And so the 10 Chin were put in. They didn't speak English. And so Sue and I were, and along with Indy and his wife Jerry, were trying to find jobs for them. And we could not find jobs. And they finally moved out of Winnipeg and moved to Brandon and worked at a meat processing plant, and eventually moved back to Winnipeg as our English got better. But one of the things that we said at the time is that if we had 100 Chin and a couple translators, we could find jobs where the translator would translate to the workers, and maybe we could work that way. We thought that would be a good way. Keep that on hold for a moment, that thought. This whole thing was, with the Chin, really, we were spending our evenings caring for them and loving them, and we were being drawn into this, and we kept thinking, should we stay with a focus on Native ministry, or should we refocus to refugee work? And we wrestled with this so much, and I remember we took a trip down to Florida to visit my brother. We were coming back up, we were going through the Smoky Mountains, and Sue had given me a book. I never read the book, but the title was all, I think she knew exactly why. I just needed the title. And the title was, If You Want to Walk on Water, Get Out of the Boat. Okay, and because one of my tendencies is I tend to be very faithful. I don't jump ship very easily. And so I was wrestling with it, and Sue knew that, and we were talking about it and praying about it. And somewhere in the Smoky Mountains, we said, yep, we both said we need to make this move. We didn't know where that was going to lead, because in Winnipeg there was no refugee work that was being done by evangelicals, by born-again Christians. It really wasn't. It was a barren scene at the time. And so we joined MSC, and with an exception of a few years that we were with international teams doing the same thing, we we have been with MSC since 2005. And in that time, one of the first things I did was I wanted to see what was going on with refugees in Winnipeg, what the government was doing, what services were there. So I was going around visiting different organizations, getting to know the directors. And I remember in particular this one visit I had with Welcome Place. And Welcome Place is the government receiving agency, which you also have one here in Guelph, Waterloo area, which I'll mention more in a minute or two. But that receiving agency would bring the government-sponsored refugees to Winnipeg, settle them, and I wanted to get to know him. So I met the director. His name was Marty. He was from New York City, and he was Jewish in background, but also just a very bold kind of guy. And he's sitting behind a desk, and I'm feeling kind of intimidated because I don't know what I'm doing, and I have no idea where we're going. And Marty bellows out at me, and he goes, "Where are the Baptists?" And I thought, Baptists? I don't know, Marty. I don't know. I'm not one. I don't know where they are. I don't know. And then I thought about it. I thought, okay, I think I know exactly what you mean by that. You mean, where are the evangelicals? Where are the born-again believers? Where are the ones who are Christ followers? And at the time in Winnipeg, there really wasn't any. And that was the beginning of our journey, but it really did start with that and went from there. Well, then, back to Brian Syme for a moment. We were at Mission Fest 2006, and Brian Syme was there, and Sue met him at the booth and was looking at his books, and we got to know Brian and realized that Brian held a different philosophy on church planting than it was normally taught. And the normal thinking is what's called the homogeneous unit principle, which means every church is of the same ethnic group. And so, like, the alliance is very strong in this. So you'll have a Chinese Alliance church, a Japanese Alliance church, a First Nations Alliance church, and you plant by homogeneous units. But we were already kind of running against that thinking for the last 20 years, thinking in an urban setting, it doesn't work. And it doesn't teach unity of the believers. And there's a whole long story behind this on why we began to change in our thinking. But this was critical to our church planting philosophy, because previously Sue and I tried to plant two other churches. One was a Spanish assembly in Illinois, and another one was a First Nations church in Winnipeg that we were working on, mostly First Nations. And we were following that principle. But Brian was talking about the intentionally intercultural church, the idea that the church should be made up of the nations worshiping together and integrated intentionally on every level, not by chance, but by intentional decisions that the congregation makes. And so what happened then, in the same year of 2006, the government of Canada this time put 10 Karen people from Burma into Winnipeg. And we were thinking, well, they're going to do it again. Nobody speaks English. Well, one person spoke a little bit of English, but the others didn't. And they're going to end up going to Brandon or somewhere else. It's not going to work. And if we only had, a couple hundred Karen and a few translators, we could do something. And so I was bemoaning this fact to my good friend, Murray Taylor. I didn't think Murray could do anything about it. I didn't think Murray would, how would Murray be able to do anything? And Murray pauses and says, well, I'll introduce you to some people who can make a difference. So he invited us to the Manitoba Business Council meeting, and this was the head of the corporations of Manitoba, and we made a pitch along Indy and Nake, who was Karen, and myself, and we said, if you'd give us 300 Karen with a couple of translators, we'll get them jobs, and this could work. We didn't think anything of it, except for what we didn't know is that they had also invited the Prairie Director for Immigration to that meeting. And that Prairie Director was sitting there, and after we left, they asked the Prairie Director, they said, Murray wants this would be good, you should do it. So they put 300 Karen into Winnipeg. It might have been 200 to begin with, eventually 300. When they did, all of a sudden, Indy and I had a problem because we had to find employment for them. And long story short, God opened up that door for us. And I don't know how many of you are farmers, but if you have a Westfield auger, it was made by our Karen friends, because we were able to land over 100 jobs at Westfield building augers, and now they're moving to Midland trailers, making trailers for all in Rosenort, Manitoba. So God opened the doors for us, and it was really quite amazing. But as we were going to the welcome place, and we were allowed at the time to walk the halls and see people into the room. We'd go to the airport, meet people at the airport, then we'd bring them back. And when we'd meet them in their room and get to know them, we started meeting some people in the hallways. And we started meeting people from the Congo and from Burundi and from Somalia and from other places. And our minds began to just absolutely explode with what was taking place, like all these friendships. And at the same time, we had this thought of the intentionally intercultural church. India and I were elders at our local assembly, along with 2 others. And so we came back and we were talking to them about could we bring them, and at the same time, somebody gave their life insurance money. Their wife had died. They gave the life insurance money to us and said, you can use that for however you want to establish that work. So we started busing people. We started bringing in lots of buses, 2 buses on Sunday morning, 1 in the midweek, and 1 on Saturday, I think it was, to parks. And we had a program going, and we were an assembly of 100, now we're an assembly of well over 200. We were busting at the seams, and not everybody was happy with that. Not everybody was as happy as me. I was thinking this was fantastic, and not everybody was thinking this was great. And so then along came an offer from a friend that said, I'd like to help you add on to the building. And when that happened, India and I brought it up to our other 2 elders, and they weren't so keen to add on because they weren't so keen on what we were doing. And so then we said, well, how about if we plant a church downtown, and we'll just start a second one. And for whatever reason, they just were not keen on it. And then we said, well, okay, well, let's just do a ministry center. We'll do a ministry center. And for whatever reason, they weren't keen on this. And I've had 3 valleys in my life, really deep valleys. And this was one of them. And this went on for almost 2 years. So we're working, we're visiting homes at night, and we're doing all this, and we're bringing people to church and busing them to church, but I can't move my fellow brothers to see the vision of where to go and what is the future of this. And so finally, we brought in a church consultant, and the church consultant looked at it and said, well, you have 3 options. You could add on, you could plant a church, you could open a ministry center. I kind of thought, well, I think I kind of knew that. But we used that, and we said to our fellow elders, we said, okay, how about this? Bless us to leave, and we'll plant a church. That's one of the 3 options, bless us. And they said yes, and they blessed us. So we didn't split the church. They're still our friends today. In fact, they support our work today. They're good friends. So what I'm saying is that this kind of radical work can affect a local assembly. In our case, we looked at what was going on. We had a lot of people from the Chin and the Kren, and they were Baptist in background. And I thought, okay, I have, my concern is that I could plant this church as a Brethren assembly, but then after I'm done and gone, they may very well join the Baptists, and then the question is which Baptist group will they join, because Baptists are not equal in every way. There are liberal Baptists and there are solid theological Baptists. I thought, it would be better if I just plant this as a Baptist church. So we planted it as a Baptist General Conference church. Its roots are Swedish. And we did that really as insurance to try to keep it from going towards the liberal denomination eventually. Now, I think if you asked anyone at church what denomination we are, they'd all go, I don't know. I have no idea. And we operate on a plurality of elders, and we continue on that work. But that is the work. But at the same time, we began a ministry center called City Connections. And so we started the church in 2008. We started a ministry center, and at that ministry center we helped people find jobs. Indy claims we helped find 1,000 jobs. Not sure if that's exactly accurate. That seems kind of high. And we helped with English classes. We had a transitional classroom for newly arriving refugee kids, so ages kindergarten to grade 5 going on. We had furniture distribution. I mean, you can just get into this thing. It can just go so many different directions, and we were doing that. And the Lord was blessing it. And out of that eventually came the offer by a good friend to help us buy a building. And in 2015, we bought Naomi House, the building. It was a former appliance repair shop. We took 2 years, 2015 and 15, 16, and part of 17, actually, and we renovated the building with all volunteer help. We opened it up that fall. It's 7 bedrooms, meeting space, offices. And God has blessed us, and we're in the process of trying to add on currently. The conclusion is that we're going to have to tear down the building next to us. That's a whole other story, and rebuild, but that's part of the whole journey. But God has blessed us with that. And so I want to just, I know I'm getting a little late here, but I want to just share a video with you. And so if you could share that first video of Naomi House. This is just about a 3-minute video, and I have one other I'd like to share, and I'll wrap it up. We were sitting around in someone's living room, and we were talking about the vision of starting Naomi House, and we were looking for different names and different ideas, and we were talking about the story of Naomi and how her story was so much like other refugees. And it was at that point that one of us said, why don't we call it Naomi House in honor of her name and giving it a biblical context and story. Often refugees are looking for a way in which to sponsor family. They don't know how to fill out paperwork if they're doing a group of 5, or perhaps their family members don't have UNHCR status and they don't have a way of coming. They need what's called a sponsorship agreement holder, a SAW, which is what we are. And so it gives hope to those who have no way of bringing family. And it also is helpful for people who have no connection at all. We can sponsor refugees who may be persecuted Christians, who have no connection, no way to be sponsored. We can reach out and bring them here. Our hope is that we can help other churches catch the vision for sponsorship, for caring for newly arriving refugees, for helping settle refugees. And so Naomi House, our desire is that it not just be us, but to really bring the churches together to caring for refugees. There are 4 things that Naomi House does when we go into action. The first one is sponsorship. The second one is settlement. The third one is the house itself. And the fourth one is programming. When Naomi House sponsors a refugee, what we're able to provide through Candace's work especially is filling out the applications. Applications are quite detailed, quite complex. It can be quite daunting. In fact, many people give up in the sponsorship process because the paperwork is overwhelming. Now, I should also say that sponsoring isn't just the paperwork, but it's also the financial aspect of it. Depending on the situation, a sponsorship could be between $18,000 to
$50,000. It could be family that's been saving up money to sponsor a loved one. It may be a church that has pooled money together to sponsor a persecuted family that are of Christian background. Naomi House never profits at all on any of the sponsorship funds that we bring in. Settlement of refugees when they arrive is a one-year commitment that the Canadian government requires of us. And there are approximately 72 steps involved in that settlement process. Finding an apartment, enrolling children in school, applying for benefits that the Canadian government gives to all of us. The settlement is monitored by Paula, and she does an excellent job checking that over, and then it's carried out by volunteers. Naomi House is also a physical home. It's a 7-bedroom transitional home for newly arriving refugees, and it's very special in our heart. We spent 2 years renovating it with volunteer help and opened it up debt-free. It consists of our offices, the bedrooms, meeting space, and it is the hub of our activity. Programming at Naomi House is in addition to the 72 steps of settlement that we do. This is programming that enriches the lives of newcomers or helps them in their adapting to Canada, which is different than those other steps. So, for example, trauma care is one of the ones in which that we offer. Shahrazad, our trauma counselor, works with people through the trauma that they've gone through. We have a sewing program, which it's teaching skills, but it's also providing a social interaction. And then we're offering ESL as well. I think that refugee work is one of the most significant things that Christians can do in Canada. It's a way in which we can be practically involved in the lives of people, showing love, hospitality, care to those who have suffered greatly, and it reflects the very values of Christianity and of Christ followers. Naomi House is walking with refugees as they rebuild their lives in Canada.
And so I think we'll skip the second video because of time. But that gives you an overview of what this whole journey kind of funneled into this. And God has blessed us with a team of about 12 of us. So there's, on the MSC side, we have Candace, who was in the video, with her husband Brett, with Annika, and then Sue and myself. And then we also have with us Indy with Vision Ministries, and Akmol with Interact Ministries, and Shahrazad with International Association for Refugees, and then a couple paid staff members as well to make it all work. God has blessed that. As I share this, I'm not thinking that you should do what we did. Although if you did, that would be wonderful, and I'd be happy. But maybe there's some ideas along the way, some thoughts. But here's the biggest one I want to leave you, and that is hospitality. Hospitality is the most important thing you could do. To build friendship is that, if somebody comes into your assembly, invite them over, which you probably already do, but invite them over and then see them in the middle of the week. Build friendships, identify needs, and then be bold and just call them up and say, hey, do you mind if I come by and visit? Because that really shows friendship for many cultures when we go into their world as well. It's such an important thing. There's other things you could do. You could do conversation circles. You could do furniture distribution. You could adopt a Canadian family kind of program. You can learn to cook their foods. You can do so many things. It's a wonderful ministry. And I just want to say thank you for giving me the opportunity to share this evening. It's been great to be with you. May God bless you. Are there any questions maybe anybody have? Yeah, Randy. Oh, yes, please. It was in my notes, but I didn't get to it. So about a month ago, we had our Afghan fellowship retreat. So in the sponsorship, Naomi House has sponsored 170 Afghans. Most of them are not believers, but some were. So Ali and Farin, for example, are believers. There's others who came as believers. And so we held, in partnership with one of the assemblies in Winnipeg, Ron Hampton's church, we held a retreat at Faith Bible Camp, and we had 85 Afghans attend. Probably about more than half of them were not believers. Half were believers. Many of them had come to faith as refugees, and some came to faith in the journey of coming to Canada once they arrived. The non-believers, their comments were just so encouraging to hear. So some of the things that they were saying was, I didn't know what a Christian marriage looked like. I didn't know what a good marriage looked like. They were seeing couples holding hands, walking, the believers. They're seeing this model difference. A couple of the ladies were saying to Sue, next year we'd like to come back here and we'd like to cook at the camp, and we want to help. These are Muslim ladies that want to come and help. Others they heard the story of the prodigal son, and they were really moved by that story and what it really meant, the love of the Father. And it was pointed out to them, the love of God our Father and his love for us, even when we wander. And so seeds were planted, and the work was really significant. One of Satur actually had said, and by the way, the reason I can say his name is because he said, I have nothing to lose anymore. You can use my name as much as you want. Satur said, I've never been with a group of this many Afghans, and they all got along, and there was no arguments, there was nothing happened. It was amazing. So it was really a phenomenal retreat. Yeah. Any other questions? I've kept you too long, so.
As you're working with the Canadian government on these sponsorships, are there any restrictions on you as a church or a Christian organization and how you conduct them?
By God's grace, not really. For the most part, no. We can sponsor whoever we want, and we're not told a quota of who or how much, or not how much, but of who. The Canadian government at this point has been quite good about it. That could change tomorrow, but we are grateful for that. Yeah. Any other questions? Yeah. Well, thank you so much. I hope that's something, maybe a seed of thought, maybe for any one of you. So thank you.